G'day. Welcome to Never Never. Stories from the Australian dark. Real accounts, old myths, and everything the Outback doesn't want you to think too hard about. We're a small channel and genuinely grateful you're here. If this one gets under your skin, a like and subscribe means everything to us. Now, settle in. I've driven some miserable roads in this country. Dirt tracks through the outback in midsummer heat. Night runs through the Pilbara, where road trains come at you out of nowhere. Mountain passes in the Brindabellas, with fog so thick you couldn't see the bonnet. I've slept in rest stops and pulled U-turns on station tracks in the black of a Western Queensland night. I'm not easily rattled behind a wheel. I want you to understand that before I say anything else. This happened to me on McKillops Bridge Road, in the Snowy River National Park, in the early hours of a June morning when the sleet was coming in horizontal off the ranges and I was operating on about 4 hours of sleep, spread across the previous 48. It started with a bad decision. Most stories like this do. I'd been down in the Orbost district on a long contract, site work out in East Gippsland that had dragged 3 days over schedule and left me thoroughly cooked. I should have stayed the extra night, found a pub in Orbost, pulled up somewhere past Buchan, slept in the car at a rest stop. I knew I should, but I was done. I wanted Sydney, my own bed, my own kitchen, and 500 kilometres of road to disappear behind me. I left Orbost at around 10:30 that night. The weather had been deteriorating all afternoon, low cloud pressing in off the ranges, temperature already below zero, that particular sharpness in the air that tells you something worse is coming. By the time I cleared the edge of town and picked up the Bonang Road heading north, the sleet had started. Not snow, not rain. That miserable in-between stuff that doesn't commit to being either. It hit the windscreen in waves, and the wipers smeared it into a grey, greasy film that the washer fluid couldn't cut through. The heater was running full, cabin warm and stuffy. That artificial heat that makes your eyelids heavy when you've been awake too long. 40 minutes out of Orbost, the GPS rerouted me. Traffic delay detected, faster route available, and I was tired enough, irritated enough, just switch-brained enough to tap accept without really looking at what I was accepting. The GPS took me off the road. I followed it down a turning I didn't know, then onto a secondary road, then onto something that wasn't much of a road at all. The bitumen fell away, and the tyres started crunching on loose gravel, and I remember thinking, this doesn't feel right. But the blue line on the screen kept showing me going forward, and I was already too far in to turn around on a track that had narrowed to one lane. By the time I understood what I'd done, I was on McKillops Bridge Road. I know the name now. I looked it up the next morning, hands still shaking over the keyboard. A tourist route in better seasons, a scenic drive, a road people travel in daylight, with time and a genuine appreciation for the dramatic geography of the Snowy River Gorge. Not at 1 in the morning, not in sleet, not in a two-wheel drive sedan with all-season tyres already down to 50% tread. The road was single lane, barely that. It had been carved into the side of a sheer cliff face somewhere deep in the national park, and the mountain had never quite accepted the intrusion. The surface was unsealed, dirt and compacted gravel turned to slick, greasy mud by the melt, and it wound its way along the cliff edge with the casual indifference of a track that wasn't built to be forgiving. To my right, a solid wall of rock. Black. Wet. Dripping. Close enough that I could hear gravel ticking against the passenger side panel as the road narrowed even further. To my left, nothing. I mean that literally. Nothing. A void. A drop that my headlights couldn't illuminate the bottom of because there was no bottom visible. Just black and more black, and somewhere impossibly far below, the Snowy River working its way through the gorge in total darkness. I couldn't see it, but on the quietest stretches, when I bled the engine back to idle and the road noise dropped, I thought I could hear it. A distant, low murmur rising from somewhere far below, indifferent to whether I made it out or not. I have a reasonable head for heights. I'm not someone who goes to pieces on a cliff walk. But there is a fundamental difference between standing at a cliff edge in daylight with solid ground underfoot and sitting inside a car on a mud-slicked track with your left tyres 18 inches from an unguarded edge that drops 1,000 feet into the dark. The black ice was the worst of it. It formed in patches wherever water had run across the track and frozen. No shine, no warning. 1 second you're rolling forward, and the next, the tyres go loose and the car steps sideways, and your stomach drops like you're already over the edge. I learned to read the surface the hard way, watching for the slight sheen change, the way the headlights reflected differently off frozen mud. I crawled, genuinely crawled, 10, sometimes 15 kilometers an hour. Both hands locked on the wheel so tight that after the first hour, my forearms were cramping from the wrists to the elbows. The sleet kept coming. The wipers kept their rhythm. Thwack, smear, thwack, smear. The defroster worked hard on the lower half of the windscreen, but the upper section kept fogging from the outside. I had to reach up and wipe it with the back of my hand. Every time I lifted a hand off the wheel, my chest tightened. There was nobody else out here. Of course there wasn't. That was the thing that settled over me slowly, like cold water filling a room. No headlights behind me, nothing coming the other way. No houses, no power lines, no fences, nothing to indicate anyone had ever built anything in this valley except this one miserable thread of a road stitched to a cliff face in the dark. I'd lost phone signal before the turn-off. I knew that. I hadn't thought much about it at the time. I thought plenty about it now. I was 2 hours in when I saw the first movement. Peripheral, just at the outer edge of what my driver's side vision could reach, up on the steep embankment above the road. I was in a section where the cliff had pulled back and the hillside climbed at a severe angle into snow gums. Twisted things. Small, pale trunks with peeling bark, branches thrown out at strange angles. The kind of trees that look dead and have looked dead for years and yet keep standing. Something moved between them. I caught it in my peripheral vision, and my first thought was Brumby. Wild horses run through that country, common enough, but the shape was wrong. Too high off the ground, too upright. Brumbies move at the shoulder. This silhouette was moving higher than that, and it wasn't the horizontal outline of a horse. I couldn't look properly. I physically could not turn my head to look at it. The road demanded everything I had. The left edge, the mud, the ice patches catching the headlights, the next blind bend working its way toward me in the dark. 1 second of inattention, and I was over. I knew that with complete certainty, so I kept my eyes on the road and watched the shape in fragments. What I saw in those fragments did not make me feel better. It was big. Not large animal big. Not the way a stag is big, or a bull standing against a fence. Big in a way that made me recalibrate completely. The silhouette moved between the snow gums, and it was broader than the trunks it passed behind. Taller, moving on 2 legs, upright, heavily built across the shoulders and chest, with long arms that swung low at the thighs. Dark, all over, covered in something thick and matted that didn't catch the light the way a smooth coat would. More like a mass of it, dense, shapeless at the edges, and it was keeping pace with the car. I was doing 12 kilometers an hour on the ice, and this thing was moving through steep, rocky scrub in sleet and darkness, and it wasn't working to keep up. It was just keeping pace, moving laterally across that slope with a loose, rolling agility that my exhausted brain kept telling me was impossible for something of that size on terrain that steep. I told myself it was a rue. Big male, unusual colouring, standing tall the way they do. I told myself it was the shadows, the sleep deprivation, 16 hours of strain manufacturing threats out of nothing. I told myself all of it, and I did not believe a word. For nearly 20 minutes I drove that stretch with the shape in my peripheral vision, catching it between the trees and strobed fragments as the headlights swept the embankment on each curve. Sometimes I lost it entirely, and the relief was so profound, my grip on the wheel actually loosened. Then I'd catch it again. Closer now, I thought. Lower on the slope than before, and I'd lock back down. Then I rounded a tight blind corner, and I stopped the car. Not because I wanted to, because there was a tree lying across the road. Not a massive tree, not a red gum or a river oak. A snow gum, maybe 20 centimeters in diameter, spanning the full width of the track, lying at a slight diagonal with its root ball toward the cliff wall and its crown hanging over the drop. No room to the right, no room to the left, no way past without moving it first. I sat in the idling car and stared at it. The wipers kept going. Thwack, smear, thwack, smear. I thought about waiting. For what? I couldn't tell you. Daylight was 5 hours away. Nothing was coming from behind me. The road was too narrow to reverse along safely in the dark, and far too long to reverse to the highway even if I could manage it. I had to move the tree. I got out. The cold hit me like a fist. Not just cold, that specific alpine winter cold that gets under your clothing immediately and starts working on the skin. The sleet was coming sideways now, driven by a wind off the ranges that I hadn't felt inside the sealed cabin. I was in a fleece and jeans, not dressed for this, not remotely. The headlights lit up the fallen trunk and the first few meters of road on either side. Beyond that, absolute darkness. The void to my left was invisible, but present, felt rather than seen, taking up space in the awareness the way something large in a dark room is present. And then I smelled it. I don't know how else to describe it except to say it hit me before I'd taken 3 steps from the car. A wall of it, wet dog, but amplified past any dog I've ever been near. Underneath that, something biological and decaying. Meat past the point of eating. The smell you associate with something large having died nearby and returning to the ground. And underneath even that, something swampy, stagnant. A deep waterhole smell. But wrong, like it was coming from something that carried it as a signature. I've been in the bush my whole life. I know what animals smell like. I know the musk of a mob of roos. The sharp ammonia of a wombat burrow. The sour sweetness of a carcass in summer heat. I have never, in 41 years, smelled anything like what I smelled standing on that road. I grabbed the trunk and started pulling. The bark was wet and cold and my hands slipped. I got a better grip and dragged it sideways toward the drainage ditch at the base of the cliff wall, heavier than it looked. My boots hit a patch of ice and I went down on one knee, got back up, kept pulling. That's when I heard it. From the ridge directly above me, something heavy moving through scrub, not cautiously, not picking its way, deliberately, the crack of a branch, then another, then the sound of something with real mass shifting its weight on the rock shelf directly above the road, something placing itself. I told myself Brumby. I told myself Wombat. I told myself stop thinking and move the tree and get back in the car. I gave the trunk one final hard pull and swung the crown off the left edge of the road. It caught on the drainage ditch. I had to crouch and lift the end of it to clear the drop. That's when I looked at the break point. I'd been assuming it was a windfall, sleet, ice, a weakened root system, the way trees come down in a winter storm. The break wasn't natural. I grew up on a property. I know what storm-snapped wood looks like. The long, fibrous split, the way it tears along the grain, the grey-brown drying that starts at the edges within hours. The exposed wood at the break point was pale green-white and wet. The fibres were sheared, not torn. Compressed and forced outward in a way that told me something had grabbed that trunk and bent it, hard and fast, until it gave. The break was clean in the way that something breaks when force is applied suddenly and with intent. No decay, no soft spots, no storm damage. This tree hadn't fallen. It had been pushed. The sounds from the ridge above me got louder. I dropped the wood and I ran. 3 steps to the car door. Into the cabin. Lock engaged before I'd even registered sitting down. I mashed the accelerator and the tires spun on the ice, and the back of the car stepped sideways toward the edge. I lifted off for one heart-stopping second, felt the grip come back, and I drove. No decision, no conscious thought, pure animal flight. I was 10 meters down the road before I heard the impact. A rock, thrown hard from the darkness above and behind me. It hit the rear door panel with a bang loud enough inside the cabin that I shouted out loud. Not a pebble flicked up by the tire. Not debris off the cliff face. Something that had tracked me from the embankment to the road marked my position in the headlights and hurled a stone with enough force to leave a dent I'd find in the morning. I drove, hands shaking, tires sliding, the void to my left cutting at the edge of my vision on every bend. I did not slow for the blind corners the way I should have. I did not check the mirrors. The terror of sliding off that cliff edge was real, but the terror of what was behind me was worse. And the body makes its choices in those moments without consulting the part of your brain that weighs consequences. The road went on for a very long time. Then the terrain changed. The cliff walls fell back. The road widened slightly. The snow gums dropped from the ridge and the slope softened beneath them. I was descending, the road beginning its long curve down toward the river flats, and the void to my left sealed itself behind a tree line. And then I was on the bridge. McKillops Bridge, an old steel span built in the 1930s, crossing the snowy river at the gorge's narrowest point. In a photograph, it looks like nothing. Driving onto it in the dark, with my hands still shaking and sweat cooling on my back, it felt like crossing out of one country and into another entirely. I drove off the far end and saw the campground sign and turned in without thinking. A handful of rigs set up on the flat ground beside the river, a couple of four-wheel drives with rooftop tents. The fading glow of a campfire somewhere across the clearing. I couldn't see anyone, not at that hour, but I could feel the presence of other people in the way you feel it when you've just come from a place where there were none. I cut the engine. I sat there. The adrenaline takes a long time to leave. It doesn't drain all at once. It empties gradually, like water from a cracked container, and what it leaves behind is a bone-deep exhaustion you can't quite feel properly yet because the cortisol is still running. My hands were shaking. My jaw was clenched so hard my back teeth ached. The inside of the cabin smelled like my own fear. I thought about pitching the tent. I had one in the boot, rolled and bagged. I thought about it for 20 seconds. Then I thought about stepping out of the car in the dark beside a tree line with whatever was still up on that ridge. I stayed where I was. I checked the door locks, all four, checked them again, reclined the driver's seat as far as it would go, pulled my jacket over my chest like a blanket, and lay there staring up through the windscreen at the sky beginning to thin somewhere in the east. I didn't look at the dent in the rear door panel until morning. It was deep. A clean impact. Not a scrape. The kind of mark a large, heavy stone makes when thrown with serious force against sheet metal. I stood in the pale winter light with the river sound coming up from below and the camp stirring quietly around me, and I looked at it for a long time. I thought about the break in that tree, the green, wet wood, the fibers sheared outward, the intelligence required to push a trunk across the only exit point on a single-lane cliff road, to place it across the one section where there was no room to go around it. And then wait. I've told this story a handful of times since. Most people assume I hit a roo in the dark and spooked myself. That the tree was just a windfall. That the rock was debris off the cliff face. I used to try to correct them. I don't anymore. I know what I saw keeping pace with that car on the embankment. I know what I smelled when I stepped out of the cabin. I know what a natural timber failure looks like. And I know what I was holding in my hands in those headlights. Some country in this state does not want you in it after dark. It has been that way for a very long time. McKillops Bridge Road after midnight is not a road you go back to. Not once you know what uses it.